Good afternoon. Welcome back to the afternoon session. Now we'll have third session on tribal issues, socio-economic conditions of tribals in India. In the morning, we had discussions on Muslims and Dalits. Now we are having one more session on the excluded communities, one of the excluded communities in India, on tribal communities. So I request the chair and panelists please come to the dais. I request Professor Hafruz Alam Sahab, Professor Shahid Sahab, and speakers Professor Ramdas Sahab and Professor Khan Swan Housing. Yes, we are already running very late, more than by 50 minutes. So I request the chairs to start the session right away. I think before that we can introduce the speakers. Professor Ajali Nimani is on the way. She is joining soon in 5 to 10 minutes. Meanwhile, I will introduce Dr. Professor Ramdas Rupwat. He is a professor in political science, University of Hyderabad. He is a JNU alumni, completed all his degrees, MA and PhD in political science from Center for Political Studies, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University. And his areas of specialization include Indian political process, politics of tribal development, land alienation and displacement, democracy, ethnic and identity politics, along with the comparative politics in indigenous societies. And also he deals with education and politics in India and Adivasi education. He has got many international awards, a Global Best Teacher Award in 2019, and also Ambedkar Media Award in 2019, Excellent Researcher Award in 2019 again, Banjara Ratna Excellent Award, Academician Award in 2019. Currently, he is head Center for Human Rights and professor in the Department of Political Science, University of Hyderabad. And I also introduced Professor Ham Khan Swan Housing. Sorry, how to. Yeah. He teaches political science in the Department of Political Science in School of Social Sciences, University of Hyderabad, since August 2012. Before that, he taught in the Department of Political Science, BHU, Banaras Hindu University, from 2004 to 2012. He was a co-researcher in Level Home International Network Project on Continuity and Change in Indian Federalism. He completed his education in political science from Center for Political Studies, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. He was a visiting fellow under the Center for Advanced Studies Program of the University Grants Commission and Department of Political Science, NEHU, Shillong in 2018, and visiting fellow under the Center for Advanced Studies Program of the University Grants Commission in 2016. He is also author of several articles and panel member in several academic journals. Though she is not here, I will introduce Professor Ajeli also. She will join soon in 5 minutes. She is a professor of sociology, Center for Study of Social Exclusion and Inclusive Policy. She is heading the center CSIP in HCU. She served as the assistant professor in Department of Sociology, University of Hyderabad since 2000. And now she has become associate professor and now she is professor. She is mainly working on the issues of Northeastern issues, particularly dealing with the human rights issues of women, those who are in human trafficking, and their travails and the kind of problems they are facing in northeastern part of India. She is specialized in particularly women's issues related to northeastern part. After that, she's also before joining HCU, she worked in other universities and also worked in several other organizations. Now she is heading center for the last 1 year. Before that, she was awarded several awards like Raman Postdoctoral Fellowship in USA in 2013 under Indo's Knowledge Initiatives, the Collaborative Arts and Research Translation of Human Advancement, USA, who awarded her first fellow grant in 2006. She was a senior research fellow, honorary special appointment, Department of Sociology, University of Johannesburg, South Africa in 2022 to 25. She has been a visiting fellow to several other institutions and got several awards. Now she is specialized in social exclusion issues related to particularly women. Now we are running short of time. Now I request the chairs to continue the session. Hardly we have 45 to 50 minutes. Please complete the session in 50 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon to all of you. I think this is most difficult session for us because after lunch, particularly for the audience, it's very difficult to digest the things which comes from the speaker. Anyhow, we have to move ahead. So, as people are aware about that, today's seminar is based on socio-religious groups in India. We have discussed in earlier session about the minorities and Muslims. Later on, before that, we have discussed about Dalit, which is called, consciously we call that scheduled tribe, scheduled caste. Now we are moving towards this third session that is related with the socio-economic status of Adivasis. Adivasis generally we call consciously scheduled tribes. Total population of these scheduled tribes in our country, according to 2001 census, is 1.4 million. And in terms of percentage, we can say that this is 8.6%. And it is widely spread in all over India. Particularly, you can say this Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, West Bengal, Odisha. There are several states, Andaman Nicobar. These are the states where the population is large in number. So, because of marginalization, these socio-religious groups are facing a lot of problems. So, most of the people residing in this in the rural village or rural areas, over the 95% of the population of these scheduled tribes lives in the rural areas. They are facing the economic problem, acute economic problem. Besides this, other social indicators problems. Less than 10% of the total population uh, uh, are hunter or gatherers, or more than 50% are dependent on livelihood depends upon the we can say that forest product. So today these community are facing a lot of problem regarding the displacement of the people. So they are facing a related with that problem. So one of the best example of that one is Narmada Bachao Andhra, in which that the height of the dam ultimately increased up to the highest limit. So for that reason, 178 villages people or villages submerged or partially submerged or fully submerged. So for that reason, there is a lot of problem. And beside this, also this scheduled caste and scheduled tribes are both are facing problem. But particularly for the tribal community, they are facing the land issues in different forms. When we see this current situation, we find this continuous. These people are facing prejudices, or often they are facing the violence from the majority community or mainstream of the society. When we see the different issues related with the social indicators, we find that most of the indicators of these tribes are in the lower side, and there is there is destruction of economic base or the livelihood. And besides that, there is a problem of land redistribution rights, and there is a major problem of we can say that ownership of land. Despite of Forest Rights Regulation Act, these tribes are facing a lot of problems. So today, our panelists probably give focus or light on the issues of these tribes or the Adivasi, which we called in our subcontinent region, particularly India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and as well as in Nepal. These Adivasis socio-economic problems will be discussed by various scholars which came here. So, without wasting much time, I would like to request uh, Professor Ham. Okay. So, Professor Ramdas sir, I would like to request Professor Ramdas sir, please come over and put your point before us. Thank you, sir.
So good afternoon, and thank you, Chair, and Shahid Raja and Afroz Alam. And I thank Jiauddin for inviting me. So today I'm going to present my paper, is Adivasis at 75 years of Diamond Jubilee celebration. And he also called Azadi Ka Amrut Mahotsav. So independence is a Amrut, okay? It's called, is a Hindu mythology says that is Siva, okay? Hala halam amrutam. So is amrutam for whom and poison for whom? Okay, this is the contradiction. Amrutam, you know that amrutam is exiler, okay? So you like if you drink amrutam, you ever, okay, young man like God, okay? So amrutam, this amrutam for whom, okay? And Ajadi, okay, independence. So Diamond Jubilee celebration. And also we the people of this country, Adivasis, okay, and tribal people, also celebrating Diamond Jubilee celebrations, okay. We also participated, Adivasis also participated in non-cooperation movement, Satyagraha, okay. Many movements to sacrifice life for this nation, this motherland. So this paper is going to discuss in three issues: Indian democracy and Adivasis, and Indian constitution, and paradigm of political Adivasi political economy. So these three things I'm going to discuss. So you know that India is a diverse country, and many scholars, okay, some people say that, some scholars says that these people are primitive, these people are savage, these people are dancing, okay, and they believe culture and all these things, you know that. And tribal, and also they're primitive and simple dance, singing and dancing like that. And also, this the main objective here is why we need democracy and development. Why you need development and democracy? Does this Amrut Mahotsav promote national integration? National integration. And also here say that, okay, many people says that, many scholars, not only tribal and non-tribal, it because of, okay, why tribal problems in India? It's a structural problem, or the legal problem, or the socio-economic conditions of this country. Why this problem? And different exploitation, okay, in the development and all these things. And we'll go discuss. There is an argument democracy holds back the development, and also India's future based on democracy and development. India's future democracy. You know the democracy means the multi-party system, freedom of press, or equality, liberty, fraternity, and all these things, and constitutional provisions. On the other hand, the development and democracy promotes development and growth. Development and growth. According to Amartya Sen, democracy is one of the important variables, growth and development. growth and development. Development includes is growth is you say that a quantitative data, okay, 10% growth, 8% growth, like that. But development, you have to develop focus on uh, social sector, HDI, okay, human development index, and people's welfare. And also the success of democracy. Any democracy, success of democracy, there is economic prosperity, fraternity, social and economic political justice, equality and liberty. So you have to achieve all these things. Then only you can success democracy. And where there is a poverty, illiteracy, inequality, and fraternity, okay, and social, economical, regional, religious inequality, ethnic conflicts, okay, ethnic conflicts, any country, democracy going to collapse. However, there is a scholar, okay, the Vilkumilika, is a multiculturalism is a branch of political theory, deal with the diversity, language, religion, caste, creed, all these things. Next, we're going to discuss the Indian democracy has problems. We know that democracy, okay, we have been discussing, okay, has been discussing, intensively analyzed, debated, criticized for a long time, okay, since okay maybe more than 200 years. Democracy means not only concerned with elections and formation of government. We think that democracy means vote, elections, representation, and formation of election, okay, formation of government. But democracy, it is much more about values, way of thinking, and practice. And also democracy need not be electoral, but can be replaced by social and political, economic justice. We need economic justice. Here, in a democratic system, the tribals are most affected people in such a democratic setup, the sort of development approach. We got independence and partition of India, Pakistan, India. There's a lot of problem in India in those in 1947. And we, the people of Indians, adopted one paradigm of economic development. What is my economic development? Industrial paradigm. Even we adopted the Western countries and Eastern countries. We adopted the Industrial Revolution, more and more industries, and then go for more. You need more and more industries. Go for primitive accumulation. What do you mean primitive accumulation? Mobilize internal resources and encroachment of the land, dams and industries, and you have to displace people. India has adapted new model of development, the mixed economy, okay, mixed economy. And here what happened is new tribal politics will be based on two things: resource politics and survival politics. And there are many debates, okay? Gurve, very relevant, Jawaharlal Nehru, and all these things. Pre-colonial period, tribals are controlling their resources, land and forest. They are almost alienated their land, jal, jungle, and jameen. Okay, they alienated all these things. They were losing their livelihood. Okay, the Indian state. Okay, after India got independence, and Nehru very relevant committee. Okay, very relevant, and He wrote a book, very relevant, and foreword written by the Nehru, the Panchasheel, called Panchasheel, the five principles. The five principles says they adapted the tribal development, okay, tribal development. What he said that, he said that Nehru said that tribals are great, tribal culture is great, okay, tribal culture is great. And you have to respect their land and livelihood, okay, land and forest, okay, livelihood. Do not over administrate them, do not impose them, okay. You have to implement, introduce minimum programs, and there are many distinctive programs were adapted. Till today, we don't have tribal policy, the tribal policy. We don't have formal tribal policy in India. The first time in India, the Vajpayee government introduced, okay, informally, separate tribal policy. And what is the backbone of the tribal development? It is constitution. Constitution. Indian constitution provide the framework, okay. If you look at the Indian constitution, it is basically talking about the integration. What kind of integration? Integrate with the mainstream society. So who are the mainstream, who are the periphery? We don't know who are the mainstream, okay, mainstream. These integration through reservation. The constitution says that there are 5th schedule and 6th schedule in constitution. Language, culture, how to protect the language and culture. And why the integration, okay, 5th schedule and 6th schedule? To protect from non-tribal exploitation, money lender, corporate class, okay, and rich class. That is why you must integrate them. But however, who protect these tribal people? The governor of the state. Governor of the state. The advice of the Tribal Advisory Council. Tribal Advisory Council. But what happened in the Telangana state? They introduced what you call GO3. Okay, GO3. So Indian state integrated with the Indian state. They integrated with the state, not the society. There's a lot of difference between state and society. They integrated 5th schedule, 6th schedule, culture, tradition, all these things, not with the society. Only they integrate with the legal framework, okay? They need integration with the society. What do you mean? How do you integrate with the society? Social and economic education development. Social, economic, and education development. But they ignore the social, economic, and education development. And they started with the reservation in legislature, reservation in education in institutions, okay? And you have to protect their culture, their traditional language. That is why they ignored the social development, the society, that the tribals became more vulnerable now, okay? This paradigm led to much more aggressive after independence. We are part of national building. So national building through, you say that you go to the Nagarjuna Sagar in Telangana state, Nehru wrote like temples of modern India. Whose temple? Where the water is flowing. Thousands and thousands of people, tribal people are displaced. There's a Chintal Tanda is there. Still the tribal people, they are selling the sticks, okay, bundle of sticks. They come from forest and there is a right bank is there, they sell their sticks. There is no proper rehabilitation. He wrote the temples of modern India. Whose temple? So he said that there's a Panchasheel, but he himself violated Panchasheel. All the Bokaro steel plant and all the major steel plant and displaced thousands of people, lakhs of people. 21% of the till today, 21% of the tribal people are displaced from their motherland. Okay, so they are investing budget only for, okay, all they are happening in tribal region. You see Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Northeast states, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, okay? And they are saying that these people. And there is no social and economic development since independence. First 5-year plan, second 5-year plan. There are many commissions appointed by this Indian state. Allocation of resources and sub-plan, okay? Tribal sub-plan. You can see the data till today, after 75 years of independence, not more than 1% allocated tribal development. The tribal and Dalit sub-plan, so they invested for Hussain Sagar cleaning. Today newspaper came, the tribal sub-plan investing to construct double bedrooms in Telangana, diverting this amount. There's no development, okay? And the poor allocations, okay? Poor allocations. And this is not a development, it's a welfare oriented. This is different from welfare. There is a welfare and development. There is a lot of difference between welfare and development. Welfare to development. There is Indian state started with the welfare to development, okay? We have to welfare to development. Sub-plan, okay? Tribal sub-plan. What do you mean sub-plan? Allocation of resources in proportion to size of their population. In any ministry, 7.5%. You take any ministry, you have to allocate resources. But this is not happening. And the Indian economy is shifted to intermediate class group, the formation of class hierarchy. Christopher Jefferson said that. He wrote Silent Revolution. The Indian economy, Indian society is based on hierarchy. The education is controlling by one group, like a hierarchy. The MANUU divided human body into 4 parts, okay? 4 parts. You see all the business class, one group. I don't want to say that now situation is very bad. One group, okay? Maybe, yeah, all the industries, okay? You take any newspaper, Adhani, Ambani, Tata, Birla, these people are Kshatriya community, feudal, okay? Feudal. Among the Sudras, okay? Among the Sudras, you can state the land is controlling by these people. And also inequalities, opportunities, okay? I'm not saying that the tribals are not developed, okay? There's a lot of developments. I did many projects, okay? Many projects on education, tribal education. MGNREGA, okay? MGNREGA. Now I'm doing Beti Bachao, Beti Badao in tribal areas, okay? Tribal areas. There's a lot of development is there, not up to mark, okay? To the mark. And also here, the social development, okay? Social, you can take social development, literacy percentage. I did a project sponsored by ICSR. 70% of the tribal children's drop out from 1 to 10th class. 1 to 10th class. You take poverty, okay? Or gender discrimination, okay? Gender discrimination. And you take... I'm doing a project in Nallagunda district. Out of 1,000, okay, the woman, okay, female percentage is 921. 921. And tribals are living in miserable conditions. And you take media, democracy. Media is controlling by rich upper class elites. All the media, in Telugu media or English media, upper class, rich middle class. You take NDTV, CNN, ETV, any TV. You take all the control by the academic, the nominal presence of the tribal people. They remain silent, safe side. They don't raise the social issues. They are not articulative. And all the sub-plans and budget taken over by the bureaucrats. So after 75 years of independence, these people are not modern, okay? Many the non-tribal say that The tribals are not elite. These tribals are not the modern. All these non-tribals are modern. Okay. Rousseau said that origin of inequality. Who are the civilized? Those are the civilized. We are uncivilized, exploitative class sitting here. Who are the civilized? They don't know anything. They believe nature, equality, democracy. Okay, gender, no gender discrimination in tribal areas. Okay, tribal society. We are uncivilized. They are civilized. This, and also tribals are much more modern. Okay, what are what are the modern indicator? How do you indicate the modern? Any criteria, any data? And tribals are much more modern. Freedom, democracy, gender equality is there in tribal society. Freedom, gender equality is there. Freedom and gender equality is there. No male and female. They don't worship ideal god. They believe nature, panchabhutas. So they are modern. So integrated with the mainstream, why they are not developed? Integrated with the market with society, land market, forest market, loan market, the corporate class, Indian state. These are alien administration. Okay, alien administration displace themselves. They are, and also these people are, and there is a. You see that is why in 1960s Naxalbari movement, 1970s Srikakulam movement, okay, and you can say 2000, what do you call the Mavanato Mavaraj in Adilabad district ethnic conflict, Salva Judum in Chhattisgarh because of dissatisfaction. Even former RBI governor said that, Raghurama Rajan says that the lazy bureaucrat, they say that stigmatizing and you are like your X, your Y, and arresting and putting in jail, prisons. So he said that lazy bureaucrats, they're saying that you stigmatize, arrest them, and kill them. This is happening in Naxalbari movement. And in 1990s, you can see the LPG, okay, liberalization and privatization and globalization. And you have to see the tribal region. Tribals are not homogeneous. They are the heterogeneous, okay. And heterogeneous in terms of religion, region, ethnic, plain. Some tribals are primitive vulnerable groups, and socio-economic politics. There are, and you cannot compare with this 5th schedule area and 6th schedule tribal people. Okay, 6th schedule people. And you can say that Northeast India, you can say that they are more literate. Okay, they're more literate. Literacy, we can take the literacy percentage is more literate. Among the tribal groups, there are many things. And there are things that there are empirical data, research data, and all things. So the question is that how do we explain this regional, cultural, ethnic intra-equality? Many scholars say that this is only structural problem, legal problem, and socio-economic problem. B.R. Ambedkar said that wherever, okay, absence of social and economic equality, the virtues of the system will overthrow the constitution which the Constituent Assembly had laboriously built. Wherever inequality, social and economic inequality. Sardar Patel, according to Sardar Patel, the inspiration and the stimulus come from above rather than below. So bottom to top approach. We are talking our Indian state, top to bottom approach. And unless the transplanted growth takes on a healthy root in the soil, there will be a danger of collapse and chaos in the society. So poison for we are Amrut Utsav. Today I read in Hindu, Indira Parthasadi said that If the root is poison, it will poison the tree. The root is my argument, is alienation. Okay, is alienation. So poison for whom? Amrutam from, you can decide after 75 years of Diamond Jubilee celebration. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramdas. Actually, initially we are not in a position to announce the time. Already moderator has announced the time. We have only 45 minutes to complete for the next session. So I would like to request all the speaker to finish their talk on their time, because we have to start at 4:30 another program. I think time is 15 minutes maximum. Later on, we will give the question answer session time. So I'm requesting all the speaker to finish. Now I would like to call Professor Jailu Madam to deliver lecture.
Thank you for inviting me. Can somebody help me to remove this? Okay. Our chairperson, respected chairperson, Professor Afroz Alam, and also the organizers, Professor Farida and Zia. Thank you for inviting me and my plenary co-panelists, Professor Swan, Professor Ramdas, and also, of course, the dignitaries here, Professor Kanchai Laya and Reverend Madhu Chandra, my colleagues, Rani his concluding remark on this very notion of how tribes are considered to be nature worshippers, and talked about briefly on religion. So let me say that I'm going to focus on identity and culture through this cult group called Haraka in the Northeast, focusing on Manipur, Nagaland, and Assam. And Haraka is an indigenous religion. Some of you may be well aware of the fact that it's more prevalent among the Zemai Nagas currently, but also among the Rongmai Nagas, Lengmai Nagas, and the Impui Nagas. Under the leadership of late Haipao Zadonang and Rani Gediliu, Haraka became an influential tool to reach out and thrive among these cognate tribes, which are also considered as the Zaliangrong Nagas earlier. It started from the early 1930s onwards. Basically, Haraka focuses on worship of one supreme god known as Tingwang or Ragwang. Earlier, they worship the lesser known gods, but eventually they focus on monotheism. And, it emerged as a reform religion. I also would like to give a brief introduction on how Rani Gediliu and Zadonang started this movement. Both of them, people often write that they are cousins. They are cousins not through family per se, but through the exogamous clan known as the Pamai clan. And Zadonang dreamt of his people living together in one geographical area in Nagaland, Assam, and Manipur. And he mentored this young girl called Rani Gediliu. She emerged as a spiritual and also a political leader after the British hanged Haipao Zadonang in 1931 at Imphal, Manipur, on charges of murdering 4 Meitei traders in Lankau village for violation of an important social taboo in which he had no role, but he was not given any space to prove his innocence. Now, in the initial journey of Rani Gediliu's spirituality, she came to know of Haipao Zadonang through her dream that led her to visit him when she was 13 years old. So she was pretty young. She succeeded him and became Haraka's spiritual leader. Professor Gangmue Kabui, many of you must have read his work, wrote that in the 1920s, the British political agent to Manipur, J.C. Higgins, labeled Rani Gaidiliu as a Maibi. Maibi means in Manipuri, a priestess. Some of the British administrators label her as a rebellious prophetess. Now, she was considered as an incarnation of the goddess Tarachamdinliu with a supernatural divine power to her possession. She resisted against the British rulers as well as the Christian missionaries who she warned were eroding her community's culture and tradition. She crusaded against conversion to Christianity, leading her critics, particularly the Naga underground leaders, to think of her as a backward lady and one committed to her indigenous religion called Haraka. Som Kamai, Professor Gangmume Kamai's son, in his latest book, Rani Gediliu, asserts that this Naga underground rebels question Rani Gediliu's loyalty to Nagas and label her as an agent of Hindu India. Now, this was further exacerbated by the hegemonic Naga leaders due to their overt Christian slogan, Nagaland for Christ. Rani Gediliu countered them by stating that she was both a Naga and an Indian. She felt that freedom should be for all the Nagas and proselytizing in any form must be discouraged. Now, the elitist Naga Christians perceive her religion, Haraka, as satanic and also superstitious compared to the Christians. Let me emphasize that in Haraka worldview, she stood for all that was glorious about Naga culture, while embracing Christianity constituted a violent rejection of all past religious beliefs and practices. The Haraka followers have their temple, which is also known as Kalumki or Kahuki, where they perform their worship to the supreme deity called Tingwang by singing songs, dance, and pray with their folded hands. You know, my paternal grandmother, she just passed recently. She was an ardent follower of Rani Gediliu, and my father often told, even she had narrated stories as to how she would dance and perform prayer as one of her youngest followers in the 1940s and 1950s in my village, ancestral village. They would remove their sandals and shoes in front of the temple, and every Haraka village have one Kalumki, that is the temple, and it is the most sacred ground for the Haraka followers. And it is usually built on the highest point of a village. If you see in the northeast, particularly the Naga villages, they are located in the hilly areas and preferably on the hilltop. Now, the model, of temple of this Haraka is also seen in all these other different states of not only in Manipur but Nagaland and Assam. And very interestingly, these temples must have a place of sunrise prayer outside facing to the east. So they worship the sun god, and perceive that above the sun god is the supreme god Tingwang. Now, let me come to the book of Rani Gediliu. Everyone knows that she is not well educated. Scholars who have worked on Rani Gediliu recorded clearly that she has never gone to school. And her notebook was confiscated by J.P. Mills in 1932 after the British arrested her. And it's kept in the Pitts Rivers Museum, Oxford in UK. She was seen to write, although the British rulers later questioned her skill of writing. Her inspiration to write a script came from her master, Zadonang, who also writes scripts and who also sent letters to the British officials, although they rejected his writings as unintelligent in Tamenglong. In fact, one of the scholars who's been extensively working on Rani Gediliu and also on Haraka cult is Arkatong Long Kumar in UK, who cited J.P. Mills in his work. stating that Rani Gediliu's notebooks were, described by J.P. Mills in 1932 as, and I quote from his book, magic books of the sorceress Gaidiliu, captured with her other property in March 1932. The writing is apparently nothing but meaningless scribbling. She is a Kabui girl of no education at all and taught herself to scribble. Her literary power gave her immense prestige, and she used to send written messages to her adherents with verbal messages to say what they meant. This is what J.P. Mills wrote about Rani Gediliu. Arkatong Longkumar has pointed out that most of these books, notebooks of Rani Gediliu at Pitts Rivers Museum in UK, have English names and some have Bengali writing in them. Two of the notebooks have a photograph of Mahatma Gandhi on their cover that suggests that Gaidiliu either procured the exercise books from local bookstores or borrowed from friends, or that she herself perhaps attended one of the government and Christian mission schools in Tamenglong district. A section of the Haraka followers believe that her notebook contains secret coded messages allegedly inscribed to help them achieve their goal of land of freedom ruled by themselves. And these writings were received, apparently, according to Rani Gediliu, from the supreme god in Bhuban cave located in Assam, and recalls that the walls of that Bhuban cave were filled with writings. So the desire and need of the Haraka followers to have a holy book canonized as the guide for the everyday phenomenology of life, with on par with other religions of the world, is a needed thing, according to Arkatong Longkumar. The reformers try to codify the rules of living as given by a supreme god through Gaidiliu, the prophetess, in this notebook. Let me also say that Haraka followers argued that if the Muslims can have their Holy Quran and Christians their Holy Bible, both supposedly written to disciple their followers' lives through teachings, why not the Haraka followers have their own holy book written by Rani Gediliu? And in fact, this book notes contains eight steps of rules like the 10 commandments in the Holy Bible. And Arkatong argued that this book gives a sense of identity through the uniformity it espouses through this book to Haraka followers. Rani Gediliu's close associate was N.C. Zaliang, who asserts that Haraka means pure. In fact, N.C. Zaliang is a very interesting leader. He was a former Christian theologian at Jorhat, Assam, and a choir leader during the visit of American missionary Billy Graham in Kohima in 1972. But he left Christianity and became one of the pioneers and president of Zaliarong Haraka Association. And I think that is a very interesting historical mark, for the Naga scholars to look at why he left Christianity and became the founder of Haraka Association. I just would like to also mention how our Haraka evolved over the years. Haraka has evolved into 4 stages. In the first stage, there are a lot of animal sacrifices. In fact, people are poor. Ramdas talk about how Adivasis tribes are poor, but Northeast tribes are a little better. But I tell you, the Northeast tribes are also very poor in the pre-independent period. But there was massive animal sacrifice during the first stage. And people were, some people were not able to cope up with their practices of rituals and sacrificing huge animals like buffalo and things like that. Now, in the second stage, in the second evolvement of Haraka, Rani Gediliu taught that the big animals can be sacrificed once in a while to be killed by a sword, but the smaller animals, the followers can use a stick with holding the legs and let the blood shed. So the blood in the sacrifice, in the ritual, in the puja is very, very significant for Haraka followers. In the third stage of Haraka evolvement, the followers were taught to, perform rituals with the animal tied and his mouth stuffed with a rag and kill. Now, in the last stage, she said, animal sacrifice is done. No more animal sacrifice in the last stage. Now, this is the interesting, and this is in around 1991 onwards. The teaching starts in the early 90s. Rani Gedilu proclaimed to her followers, while performing the ritual with a clean mind and body, recite the holy psalms and sing the prayer songs. You would be blessed for health, sound health, and to live a very happy life free from evil spirits. Please mark it. She taught her followers that if anything is wrong with you, you may throw it upon me. I can affirmably bear such things for your sake. I just, what came to my mind is the fact that, she is speaking as a prophetess, like the way Jesus Christ speaks to his disciples. Do not worry. Jesus said, do not worry. If anyone have a burden, come to me, and I will bear the burden for you. You see, so the Christian influence is very much there in the early 1990s before she passed away, when she taught her followers to stop animal sacrifice and stop shedding blood, animal blood. Hypothetically, I may be wrong, but I assume that N.C. Zaliang, a former Christian theology student, has an influence on Rani Gedilu to make Haraka's progression from practicing animal sacrifices to complete avoidance of animal sacrifice in his last stage in the early 1990s. Now, the idea of Rani Gedilu's teaching to Haraka followers that sacrifices of animals in any ritual are to be totally abolished is an inextricable part of Christianity, where Christ taught that there is no need to make animal sacrifice like in the olden days of Abraham. Muslims in the Quran says Abraham. In Christianity, the Bible, they say Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and their descendants, how they used to make sacrifices, animal sacrifices in the Old Testament. But in the New Testament, no more sacrifices. Why? Because Jesus died on the cross, shed blood for the people of the world on the cross of Calvary. Therefore, he says that there's no need for a sacrifice like the olden days in the Old Testament. He becomes the lamb. The lamb represents, the sacrificial lamb represents Christ who shed his blood. Here, the lamb represents Christ as both suffering and triumphant. It is typically a sacrificial animal and may also symbolize innocence and purity and gentleness, because Christ was convicted for no sin of his. I find that the central teaching of Rani Gedilu, as if, when she said, and if anything is wrong with you, you may throw it upon me, I will affirmably bear such things for your sake, resembles what Christ said, come to me if you are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for my soul. Now, there are community leaders who have told me, when I did my research on Rani Gedilu, which was published in the Indian Journal of Gender Studies by Sage Journal, that Rani Gedilu was very keen to convert to Christianity. I am told by a few community leaders that she was on the verge of taking water baptism to be a Christian. But at the last minute, she declined to do, because the Naga nationalist leaders and the Naga people in general were very critical of her. In fact, she was stigmatized and she was labeled as a sorcerer, and therefore, she declined to be a Christian. So the Haraka themselves see the movement as a reformed religion. And, for them, Bhuban cave is very important, just as Tirumala temple is very important for the Hindus, and then Mecca is very important for the Muslims, or Amarnath temple is very important for the Northern Indians, Bethlehem in Palestine is very important for the Christians. Bhuban cave is a point where all the Haraka believers go on a pilgrimage every year in the month of February. So let me just come to the last portion of my talk, that is Sanskritization and affiliation to Hindutva ideologue. Now, under Rani Gaidiliu, Haraka became an influential tool to reach out to various cognate tribes, and it thrives among these 4 tribes. And very interestingly, among these 4 tribes, one of them called the Romic tribes, Sanskritize in order to enhance their social status and mobility, especially in the Imphal Valley, like the way sociologist M.N. Srinivas found in his study the lower castes in Karnataka, how they Sanskritize by imitating the upper castes. You know, the Kabuis, the Rongmais imitate the Meiteis. Reverend Madhuchandra will know better than me about this. Unlike the lower castes in Karnataka who practices teetotalism, the Rongmai Nagas did not desert their non-vegetarian food habits and drinking of the traditional beer called zao, okay, which is a fermented rice beer. Now, the newborn infants were given Sanskritic or Sanskritized names like Shyam, Arjun, Ram, from Mahabharata or from any of the Hindu mythological books. The Jaimais, the Liangmais, and the Puimais were not strongly influenced by the process of Sanskritization, but the Rongmais were strongly influenced by the process of Hindu Sanskritization, perhaps because they live among the Vaisnavite Manipuris. Now, let me also say that it is true Rani Gaidiliu reached out to associate with the Hindu ideologues like VHP and RSS, stressing revival of culture, identity, and working against conversion to Christianity. And Haraka has been associated with the Hindu ideologues, but it does not mean, let me be very clear here, it does not mean that Haraka followers will convert into Hinduism. That is the point I want to make it very clear. For them, preserving their culture, identity through Haraka religion is utmost important. And this is in line with what Virginius Khaka's idea in his work 2005, Politics of Language, Religion and Identity, Tribes in India and EPW, mentions that the discourse on tribal identity was shaped by those who advocated the integration of tribals as citizens of a nation state and others who sought their assimilation into the Hindu fold. Now, RSS and VHP have been actively involved with tribes in establishing schools, RSS schools at the grassroots level. What is their goal? Their goal is to help the Northeast region to become a part of mainstream India, and also attempted to introduce Hindutva ideology with singular identity. Northeast region, as we all know, has multiple. I'm sure Professor Swan is going to talk about more about Northeast. Northeast region has multiple identities with different religious affiliations. We have Buddhism, we have Muslims, indigenous Muslims, which are called the Pangals, in who are believed to be descendants of Aurangzeb, right? If I'm not mistaken, Reverend Madhu is here to correct me. And also Christianity and other indigenous religion, nature worshippers, as Ramdas mentioned, animists, all right? Now, Northeast region have this kind of multiple affiliations. And besides that, nationalism of its kind, a quest for sovereignty, a quest for self-determination and the like. Now, the RSS and BHP's attempt is to bring a singular idea of identity to this diverse and complex set of identities in the Northeast region. Let me wind up in 1 minute. I know that the chairperson is looking at me with an eye saying, Azaili, wind up. Let me conclude by saying that there are around 3,000 plus followers of Haraka religion. That means you can just calculate the statistics saying that a huge majority of these tribes have already converted to Christianity, but a minority are still there following the Haraka religion, and they are excluded socially in the true sense of the term. And for them, Haraka is a mechanism to preserve their culture and identity. I'll stop here because you're looking at me.
Thank you very much, Professor Jaidu. enlightening us on socio-cultural and religious practices critically. Again, there is constant of time. So without much wasting of time, I would like to call Professor Khan Sahab. Please come over here and share
Not
with
fair
you.
to call him Saab and Mem Saab nahi bola.
Okay, I'm sorry for that. generally we are used
लड़का
to
को
speak in
साहब
Urdu.
मिला है तो लड़की को मैम साहब बोलना है.
Yeah, bilkul, bilkul. Next time we will keep in mind that thing. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Raza and Professor Alam, my colleague, who I used to frequent their department as members of the DRC or Board of Studies. And I'm also grateful to Zia for having me on board, although I do not have an expertise on Adivasi studies as such, because my work is essentially on institutions, on federalism, issues of autonomy, power sharing, politics of accommodation, so and so forth. So what I intend to do in this brief presentation is that I would look at two broad canvas or frameworks to make sense of socio-economic status of the Adivasis or the tribals, whether they are in mainland India or in Northeast India, right? So one of the point of reference as well as departure that I would like to use here in this brief presentation is to look at one of the broad canvas of making sense of socio-economic status of Adivasis or tribals in India is to look at the issue from the vantage point of what I called crisis literature, right? So if you look at the first serious studies of tribal situation, the seminar for which was convened in IIDS, Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, in Simla in 1967, of the predominant motif which informed the convening of that seminar was the instability or the sense of urgency that scholars, policy makers, as well as the statists feel was imperative to counter, the kind of lack of emotional integration, the political instability that Naga insurgency and other type of insurgency spawned in different parts of Northeast India, and to evolve means and ways of possibly, institutionalizing and accommodating those challenges that come from the periphery or from the margins. So if you look at these corpus of literature, which in effect informed what I call the crisis literature, one is this powerful motif of how best do you manage political order and foster political stability was one of the powerful motifs and guiding, force which in effect led to serious studies as well as a series of projects that was commissioned by the Anthropological Society of India, archaeology, the People of India project that K.S. Singh has run into many volumes, which, if I'm not mistaken, has run into 12 volumes or more, right? So you have this series of literature which over time spawned a kind of literature, a genre of literature, which emphasize on governmentality, right? A kind of governmentality which is in fact entrenched in a particular episteme of containing as well as controlling the ways and behaviors of tribals in different parts of India who are susceptible to centrifugal tendencies or insurrectionist tendencies, right? So you have this kind of literature which was very much in abundance in some of the corpus of literature that the crisis, prism or the crisis framework spawned in the 1960s, 70s, which continue till today. And evidence of which you can find in the works of Nandini Sundar, Crispin Bates, Alpa Sasso, and so forth, whose voluminous works on issue of insurgency, Maoist-related insurgency, issues of human rights, issues of tribal displacement, dislocation, are in effect centered around this crisis literature, as it were. So you have this unseemly relationship or uneasy relationship as well as tension between, on the one side, the nation building as well as the state building projects, which in effect has to encounter upon a set of vociferous centrifugal tendencies that the tribals posited in different parts of India, in Bihar, in Orissa, and large part. At one point of time, Manmohan Singh, the then Prime Minister of India, considered that the Maoist insurgency posed the most serious internal security threat to India, right? So much so that these kind of crisis literature are abound in tribal studies. The second set of crisis literature, which I think stems along with this, is what I call the crisis of developmentalism, right? The crisis of developmentalism, which, as you know, was an integral part of India's nation building as well as state building projects, which in effect got unraveled even as this massive developmental project, which Ramdas talks about as Nehruvian's idea of the Temple of India, right? The big dams, the big multi-purpose projects, as well as the single hydel power project that post-independent developmentalism envisaged for developmental models in tribal-dominated areas. So we have the Narmada Dam that was built as a multi-purpose power project, and those multi-power projects are not that problematic, at least in terms of catering to diverse multiple needs and interests. But the implication of this on, on dislocating, on this location, or in terms of rehabilitation issues, had been massive. If you look at the works of Amitabh Bhaviskar, for example, you'll find that you have a very, very problematic, counter anti-developmental activities, which have never been successful in countering those developmental frameworks, right? You also have, in recent time, look at the works of Sanjeev Barua in Northeast India on the issue of this one power project called the Subhansri power project, which has massive implication because Subhansri being located in a geo-seismic sensitive area in Arunachal Pradesh might entail a lot of environmental costs, because Northeast India had been one of the major fault lines of high magnitude earthquakes which visited from time to time. And the very fact that Northeast India is located at the heart of the Indo as well as European tectonic belt make it as one of the most sensitive geostrategic areas, which is prone and susceptible to high intensity earthquake, the like of which was witnessed, for example, in 1950, 15 August 1950, when 8.7 Richter scale earthquake shook the whole of Northeast India, right? So the question of generating power, of development, in effect also unleash a set of disquieting environmental concern, in as much as it also raised issues of displacement, cutting off livelihood, not only of tribal communities who are on the lower riparian states, because Subhansri River flows, substantially in Assam, and many of these riparian communities in Assam are dependent on livelihood on natural river flows. So you also have this crisis of developmentalism literature, which implicated in terms of the extractive economy framework that are now unraveling in different parts of India. And because the tribals are the owners as the son of the soil, and the very fact that they are the repository of natural resources, stretching from Jharkhand to Chhattisgarh, to Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and other parts of Northeast India, you have a series of mining as well as special economic zones, which in effect unraveled highly contested, idea about development. And let us remember that the post-structuralist critic of development would never see development as a given, because development is something which is discursively constituted. And once a development is discursively constituted, it unleashes a series of passion, but which is never realistic, and which in effect amounts to what David Harvey would call it as, accumulation by dispossession. So you have a series of these tales that tribals in different parts of India are at the receiving end of being dislocated thanks to the extractive economic activities which raise, their livelihood, which displace their population. And some of this exemplar of this extractive economic adverse implication on tribal livelihood can be seen easily from the effects of the 12 million POSCO project in Orissa, the Nano project in Nandigram in West Bengal, and you look at the BT cotton project in Orissa, and most recently, you have the palm oil seeds plantation that is being proposed in Mizoram, which is going to have, far-reaching implications on water level, because palm oil cultivation demands a lot of water for these plants to grow as well as to be very fertile, right? So you also have a series of concerns which emerge in tribal areas, thanks to the extensive coal mining as well as uranium or bauxite extraction in different parts of India, whether it is in Karnataka, whether it is in Meghalaya in Northeast India, or whether it is in the Assam-Nagaland border. In fact, Dolly Kwikon has illuminated this very well in one of her recent books, which is Living with Oil and Coal, where she talks about the complicated, trajectory of what she calls carbon citizenship in Northeast India, where, much of the carbon capital owners come from outside. They have to navigate through this maze, which is control and gatekeeping is done by a series of state officials, armed insurgent groups, and civil society organizations in Northeast India, and which make, the villagers who are known owners of land at the receiving end, not only of environmental cost, but also of deprivation of their livelihood, because their land becomes desertified and become unsustainable for Zoom cultivation. So you have a series of these implications that, developmentalism, extractive economies unleashed in different parts of Northeast India. And one of the recent installment of looking at this could be in terms of the state agenda of coming up with a series of what we called protected reserve forest, the use of what we call wildlife sanctuary as a proxy to underscore what is called in the literature as the eminent domain of the state. Remember that if the state use the national interest, invoke the national interest, it can, neutralize existing customary laws or whatever existing laws that the state might have when it comes to ownership and actual use of property, because national interests precede or trumped all other interests. So the result of which is that whenever such protected reserve forests for the sake of tiger protection, Project Tiger, remember, or Project Rhino in the one-horned rhino project in Assam, for example, all the victims, most of the victims are tribals. And the result of which is that they are to, perpetually displaced because of this national interest, so and so forth. And their livelihood is endangered in perpetuity. So one of the recent examples that we have in Manipur, for example, is the extensive use of this Wildlife Sanctuary Act to cover much part of what we call the hill areas, which are given, protection by the Manipur Land Reforms and Land Revenue Act. And they had been having, historical protection, which the British recognize and which post-independent Indian institutions also seek to protect. And the result of which is that since the state do not have a proxy, to circumvent this traditional existing ownership of land, what it does is that it uses this special protective laws like the Wildlife Sanctuary Act, the Protected Forest Reserve Act, to kind of acquire, tribal lands. And that become one of the most, favorite institutional as well as legal tools available at the hands of the state to snatch away tribal lands so that you have a sense of environmental balance restored in those places. My contention here is that all of this, whether it is the crisis literature, whether it is of the dams and displacement, or whether it is of the extractive economic kinds, minings, as well as building of roads, transport and communication, or protective reserve forests and others spawned in different parts of Northeast India, is that it in effect leveraged what Virginius Kaka and others would call it as the integration framework, right? And if you look at closely the debate in the pre-1947 Constituent Assembly of India debates between Gurrier, Z.S. Gurrier and Viril Elwind, and subsequently in the Constituent Assembly of India debates, you'll find that there is a premium on integration approach, because state building and nation building is considered to be revolving around this pivotal idea of integrating, the tribals as if they are not properly absorbed into mainland India. And the prognosis that Z.S. Gurrier gave, for example, is to suggest that, the tribals do not constitute a separate societal structure of their own, but in effect, their backwardness stems from the improper incorporation into the Hindu mainland society. So the prognosis, therefore, is proper integration or assimilation into mainland Hindu traditional society. And once that is taken care of, the issue of tribal problems would perpetually vanish from the radar of political, economic, as well as social discourse. And you'll find this idea that what my co-panelist, Professor Ramdas, has also flagged in terms of the philosophy for NEFA that Viril Elwin wrote, where Nehru wrote a prefatory introduction for this book, and where they come up with this fascinating idea about the tribal pencil, if you read it very carefully, would also be seeped into this integration framework, although Nehru talks about the desirability of emphasizing on the characters, on the tribal genius, as well as wisdom, so and so forth. That developmentalism entails not only for tribals in Northeast India, but for all other tribal groups in India, because the prognosis that is given is, a long-term assimilation or integration into mainstream Indian society. And that should be taken care of by developmentalism, right? So if developmentalism unravel itself in ways that seamlessly incorporate the developmental needs and aspiration of the tribals, nation building as well as state building would not be problematic, and it would be in order. It would leverage political order as well as stability. But as you know from experience in Northeast India, Jawaharlal Nehru, although he was at the one of the forerunners of this tribal council, became suddenly uneasy with the idea of Naga self-determination, because unlike Mahatma Gandhi, for example, who in effect shows more sensitivity as well as more accommodation, more accommodationist when it comes to the Naga self-determination idea, because when the NNC, Naga National Council, met him in his Bhangi colony sometime in July 1947, Mahatma Gandhi in effect replied that it was a good idea, and if the Nagas are so determined to have exercised this right to self-determination, he would vouch his life for it, right? But Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel and others would never vouch for a long-term accommodation, because they consider this as a threat, not only to developmentalism that they have in mind, but also to the long-term nation building as well as state building projects that they have envisaged. And that is precisely why when Jawaharlal Nehru, along with the Prime Minister of Burma at that point of time, visited Kohima sometime in 1951, 1952, and he was greeted with black flag, and the participants of that meeting in effect went back when their memorandum was not accepted and read out. Jawaharlal Nehru took it as a personal offense, and he immediately called out the battalion, who are settled, who are concentrated in Shillong, to spare nothing, in order to teach what he calls the unruly boys, the unruly Naga boys elation, which they would learn, right? So the idea, therefore, is that although Jawaharlal Nehru and most of these founding fathers initially talks about the imperative of or desirability of accommodation, when it came to the push to the shove, in effect, they became quite uneasy with the idea of long-term accommodation, which essentially suggests that the kind of political discourse, social discourse vis-a-vis tribals in Northeast India and other parts of India continue to be ensconced in or entrenched in the integrationist framework. And I think that is precisely the problem, which in effect was also reinforced with the shift of analytical focus of sociological as well as anthropological studies in the 1970s and the 1980s, which Surendra Azotkaut calls it as the shift of focus from the tribe to the village, right? So as sociological as well as anthropological studies got shifted the analytical focus to the village, the tribes remained at the periphery, at the margin of mainstream Indian knowledge production as well as power relationship. And the result of which is that the tribals continue to lag behind in all sectors, and they are seen waiting in the wings of development being assimilated as well as integrated into the mainstream. So, so if you look at therefore closely at the institutional recourse or the institutional response that come through the 5th and the 6th schedule in terms of giving protection, thanks to the provision of, say, Tribal Advisory Council under the 5th schedule, or look at the integrated tribal development area or development agencies, which are existing in Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, in other areas, you will have a quite unseemly, institutional framework which are not autonomous, nor have the requisite power and autonomy to protect and preserve tribal distinctive identities. And the identities would be compromised. In fact, I have a student of mine who has recently submitted a thesis and he's about to defend it, who works on how intra-border change in Telangana in 2014 and 2019 has deep implication on the politics of recognition and redistribution, because most of these tribal leaders, in effect, who led the social movements as well as agitation for border change, so that, border areas which are carved out as a result of district boundary reorganization would be more or less aligned with protecting and preserving tribal interest. And as we know, the story is universal. It is not only confined to Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, it is also in different parts of Northeast India. When it comes to commonality of interest, tribals do not stand on common ground. And this is in effect a function of, as we know, party ideological as well as tribal differences. Because in Telangana, in the wake of this 2014-2019, district boundary change, many of the tribals, because of their short-term interest of being co-opted into mainstream political party at the state level, would compromise the cause of tribals. And the result of which is that many of these tribal leaders would, surrender, the larger cause of tribal issue at the altar of short-term political gains, being appointed as, a powerful district level or state level, party leadership structure, so and so forth. So the result of which is that despite having all this institutional framework in place, looks like that our tribal representatives, in effect, somehow get short-circuited in trying to kind of leverage tribal interests as well as issues. So PESA, ITDA, the tribal subplans under Article 275, and recently since 2003, the idea of special central assistance, that flows into tribal areas for tribal developments, would all the time be short-circuited because of these intersecting, tribal, party, as well as ideological divides. So the result of which can be seen in this, the 6 schedule areas as well, where you have a cascaded layer of autonomy, which is organized through, the regional council, the district council, as well as what I called in my recent writing as the homeland state autonomy model. And in fact, although they have demarcated, autonomous sphere to protect the language, the culture, the economic as well as social developmental needs of these communities, their leadership structure got fractionalized. The result of which is, one is because when you compare, regional councils or the district councils vis-a-vis the statewide political institution in terms of the demographic voice, given that, all these so-called autonomies operate within an institutional framework of a single plurality system, they do not have the power and decisive vote when it comes to state level decision making process. And the result of which is that the state interest would always preempt or trump tribal areas, whether they be at the regional or at the state council. Therefore, three things I think are important as my conclusion. I'll just be concluding in 2 minutes. One is, how then do you think about the institutional framework of accommodating the interests of the tribals, in effect, which are at the receiving end of developmentalism, of insurgency, of extractive economic ills and effects, so and so forth? How do you make, say, the idea of regional council, the district council, or regional committees, wherever tribal populations are predominant, more autonomous, and they have more agency in terms of deciding and determining their tribal futures, right? So I think one of the ways to do is to be envisioning a more robust power as well as power sharing system for these institutions. And if you look at the kind of culture of powers or power devolving powers as well as power sharing across India, there seems to be a lot of reluctance and hesitance on the part of the state elites, in as much as it is also on the tribal regional elites to devolve power to the tribal counterparts. And the most glaring example of which is the Bodoland experience that we see from time to time, which has witnessed a series of inter as well as intra-tribal conflicts, because the Bodos, despite the fact that they hardly account for less than 1/3 of the population, and in fact dominate as well as monopolize 75% of the executive council. And the result of which is that although the Bodoland Territorial Council remains the most powerful sixth scheduled autonomous structure, they in effect unleash a very stalemated conflict in Assam. So the second point, which I think is important, is what type of role do we envisage for the Naya Netas, which Anirudh Krishna talks about in other contexts, in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, and so on and so forth. But what about the role of Naya Netas that we have among the tribal communities? Do they really stood on the ground to preserve and protect tribal ideas and interests? What are the circumstances and political contexts in which they trump their interests at the cost of the state or even national interests? I think this is a very important, study that need to be done in order to throw significant light on the plight of the tribals when it comes to the socio-economic domain, right? And finally, you have the role of the CSOs, the civil society organization. After all, tribal autonomy can only be meaningful when you have a bottom-up autonomy structure, when the power is actually devolved to the tribal communities at the grassroots. And what has been the role of the civil society is also deeply problematic, because they all the time pit for short-term interests, and they trade their long-term interests for their personal, for their clan, for the tribal and other interests. And until and unless civil society work in alliance with political parties and the powers that be at the regional, district, as well as at the state level in concert, I think the idea of issue of autonomy, the issue of power devolution, the issue of power sharing would continue to be tenuous, would be continuously fragile. And unless and until, democratic justice is foregrounded in terms of the devolution of powers, because one of the major proponent of liberal defense of minority rights in recent time, Wilkim Leka, for example, would justify minority rights so long as there is internal democracy within the minority groups. And this internal democracy, in effect, give this burden on us, on the tribal communities, to ensure that the idea of democracy, which in effect goes along with the cause of justice, in a sense that if the tribal as a bloc is given power and autonomy at the state level, it is incumbent upon the political leadership, the Naya Netas within the tribal communities, to also devolve power as much as share their powers in such a way that the stakeholders in those institutions, autonomous institutions, are given effective voice, not only at the stage of policy formulation, but also at the decision-making as well as decision implementation. And unless democratic justice remains central to the discourse on tribals, I think their socio-economic status would remain marginal, they would remain backward, and they would remain of the radar of the developmental schemes that the Indian state envisioned for them. And in order to claim, agency, autonomy for the tribal, it is therefore imperative that this idea of democracy, of justice, should remain central in our understanding of Adivasis today. Thank you so much.
All right. A very good evening. When a person has nothing to say, he must be offered to chair the session. And seriously, I'm left with no words while going through the three templates of Adivasi discourse here. Ajailu Mem Sahab, Professor Swan, and Ramdas ji. He set the whole discourse on Adivasis and really posed a problem whether something called Amritam or poison. I'm still struggling to find a choice. Anyways, your discourse on different political economic model, the democratic and developmental model, and putting the entire discourse of tribals during freedom struggle to the Constitution of India, vis-a-vis making 2 points that whether we are experiencing a resource politics or survival politics, I think those who are in the audience will have an opportunity to raise many questions. Since I am on the chair, I lose this opportunity to the advantage of the audience. Fair enough, I realized that it was a learning experience. Professor Ajailu coming out with Haraka movement, having almost 3,000 followings, understanding their cultures and identity, I really felt that today I am feeling quite elevated while understanding the intricacies of this Raka groups, how that the different stages came in, where they began with animal sacrifice to no sacrifice at all, and how Sanskritization is having a biggest say. And in fact, what is happening in contemporary mainstream society, you can have a find in the tribal groups as well. So nothing is escaped. Everything is impacted. Almost the deep-seated tribal groups as well. Professor Swan has given us quite a bit in terms of putting the entire tribal discourse in a theoretical prism, coming out with crisis literature and the crisis of developmentalism, where he brought lot many empirical evidences with theoretical propositions and having his own solution model as well. Ultimately, he ended with that the leadership factionalism is all about a biggest crisis for the tribal empowerment. Fair enough. This is what I wanted to say because I have nothing to say here. So I concluded the three arguments. Now the opportunity is yours to grill them, to raise few questions. See, they are our guest as well, so we could not be so brutal. We must come out with some scholarly intervention so that they should also feel great while taking your questions. So now that we can have three questions at least to three panelists, and each question is specific to one scholar, pinpointing the agenda, not coming out with loaded comments, scholarly, because you know that here, this is a platform where we are here to develop ourselves as well. So you should be pinpointed with your questions, and keep in mind while raising questions that the questions should not be big enough to skip your tea because tea is already there for break. I'll expect my colleagues and friends in a way to take up the questions in a very lighter environment, so that those who are here to learn, they should learn, and those who are here to just have a glimpse of the arguments and develop their own future arguments, they're also welcome. Thank you, everyone. But don't leave this house without having a questions. Have one to one scholar. Thank you. Any question, please? I think. Oh, all right, Muzaffar, yeah, please.
Professor Ramdas, I'm a little curious about India's tribal policy as such, which you said that it informally came with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Was that in certain sense departure from original Alvin Nehru kind of thinking? Or, how much of that can be viewed as continuity of whatever Indian state was doing? On Professor Suhan's conceptualization of the whole issue in terms of two kinds of crises, wherein the first crisis basically is about the crisis of insurgency or separatism, secessionism, which basically puts the focus on people. And then the second is about crisis of developmentalism, which basically puts the focus on land and its resources. I'm little tempted to think about border regions and where the land itself is in state of liminality in that sense, and where in most of those communities doing there, where to conceptualize them, how, which would be better to look at that, those kind of questions.
You can take up the questions from here only. Yeah, Professor Ramdas. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your very good question. And it's about not the Panchasheel. Panchasheel is integrated policy. But Vajpayee policies, you have to develop social, integrate with the social. So develop with education, poverty, not the integrate with the state. State is focusing on only roads, communication, industries, all these things. But you have to develop the education, poverty, and more literacy. Okay. So socially you have to develop. So Vajpayee informally, he said but he's not formal, but informally said that you have to develop the separate tribal policy. The tribals are not part of integration. Okay, they have their own. We know that they have their own administration. They have their own culture and tradition. They have their own way of development, view of development. So you have to think about it. You have to recognize and develop them, not through integration. Thank you.
Let him deal with the first question.
Yeah, should I respond to Muzaffar's question? I think, this crisis literature, which I categorize as crisis of insurgency, crisis of developmentalism, are mutually reinforcing. And the end product of this crisis literature, as I argued, is that they give leverage to the integrationist framework, right? So that's what I argue essentially. On the question of land as being liminal, I think we have to be careful when we ask such type of question, because the centrality of land in tribal movements vary from case to case. Look at my recent work, for example, where I argue, for example, that the centrality of land as the drivers of autonomy movement. I look at the issue of the Nagas, the Bodos, as well as the hill area tribal people in Northeast India. And I suggest that, or I argue rather, that because land is so central to the Naga nationalist maneuvers, and in fact, the Nagas succeeded in securing the most robust identity preserving powers, because Nagaland remains the only state till today to neutralize laws made by the parliament on land and resources. Remember that there was this crisis in 2010 to 2011 where the parliament, in fact, reassert its occupied field, land as its occupied field, and there is a back and forth argument as well as contestation from Nagaland Assembly. In fact, Nagaland Assembly reasserted, given that Nagaland has special powers under Article 371A, the law of parliament on land and resources, including mines and minerals, would not be applicable. That is to say that the law made by the Legislative Assembly of Nagaland would have primacy on Mines and Mineral Regulation Development Act 1957, for example. But the problem, the flip side of this centrality of land issue also got unraveled in Naga society, as argued in one of my projects, which was published something in 2004, where I argued that given the complex nature of land and the way it got imbricated in political mobilization, because in the wake of this exploitation of petroleum in Nagaland, remember that Nagaland has one of the richest reserve of petroleum as well as natural gas, given that it is located in the Tisori belt. The Tisori belt is considered to be has one of the richest deposit of oil in the world, right? Natural gas. So there is this continual tussle between ONGC on the one side and Naga civil society to claim primary ownership and control over this, natural gas as well as oil. So the question that came into contention, especially in 2011, 2012, is that there was this oil spill in Changpang area in Wakha district, which the oil as well as natural gas runs through. And because these natural gas and oil are free-floating entities, it is very difficult, if not impossible, to demarcate the territory of ownership of different owners. Because in Nagaland, you have three types of owners. One is the state, another one is the community, and another one is individual landowners, right? So all of these are governed by disparate set of laws, which do not see eye to eye with one another. And in such case of overlapping of territories where these floating entities called natural gas or oil flows, in case of oil spill, how do you fix culpability, right? And that was a point of contention. So in that sense, I think the way we look at this has to be sharpened and given definitive focus in order to draw or elicit, proportionate response on ways of dealing such sensitive as well as contentious issue. Let me end here for now.
The last question here. Yeah. The one question only.
I can ask.
Actually, scholars should look at British rulers one group and missionaries another group. But they mix and they study the issues of Christianity and the tribals, development and empowerment. Actually, when William Carey went West Bengal, Calcutta, tribals from Chota Nagpur and Assam area met him. Come, visit us, see our conditions, liberate us. Like that, they prayed, tribals prayed William Carey. In turn, William Carey sent few missionaries to Chota Nagpur area. And from here, from Chennai to West Bengal to Northeast, Baptist missionaries and other missionaries went there. But history show that both British rulers and missionaries are one. But there are some sources like missionaries protected and defended tribals and fought for the lands of the tribals and their natural resources. Now, the history is being destroyed. The history is being rewritten
saying that Professor Ramdas highlighted this issue, saying that tribals are the nature worshippers. That is correct. Like symbols, like people are being misappropriated by the present rulers, saying that tribals are part and partial of Hindu culture and Hindu system. It is completely wrong. Tribal scholars should defend their versions and giving correct versions. Otherwise, history of the tribals and their culture will be rewritten according to their will and whims. What I want to ask here, whether only one single question, whether Christian missionaries and its work is a bane or boon to the northeastern tribal people. Can anyone respond?
I'll certainly respond.
Yeah.
Should I respond like this?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think you see, even the question has to be nuanced in the sense that if you look at the kind of contrasting position taken by Christian missions as well as the British Raj on some of the contentious issue of the time in the 19th and early 20th century. Look at, for example, the whole debate on the boys system in the Lusai Hills, right? And there were contending positions taken by the Christian missionaries as well as the British Raj, the colonialists as they were, right? So you'll find that, for example, the boy system is a slave system. The Lusais or the Mizos have two distinctive types of the boy system, which one is that in case of accidental, criminal offense, whereby someone killed someone inadvertently, and rush to the chief's place and embrace, one pillar, which we call it a song in the local language, he is in effect rescued by the chief from, possible killers of that person who have committed the inadvertent crime, right? So that's a very human system in the sense that it is not a retrogressive practice. So the boy system has this human side attached to it. And some of the Christian missionaries, in fact, not all Christian missionaries have similar, opinion or views on some of these contentious issues. So they also deeply divided within themselves, right? And on the other side, you have some of these colonialists who, in fact, are ruthlessly against the very idea of the boy system because they thought that is against, the idea of modernity at all, right? Because slavery system in any form or in any manifestation, howsoever humanistic, can never be justified. So in that sense, I think the important contribution of Christians have also got to be appreciated. And they are not destroyed forever. They are now archived. And it is incumbent for us as scholars to retrieve those archival sources and draw inference from them in order to have a very objective, holistic understanding of the complexity of debates that some of these contentious issues raise. And I think once we do that, I think our contribution to the society would be quite, illuminating as well as useful. Thank you.
So, you're saying that the Hinduism, but tribals are not part of Varna system. There is no hierarchy among tribals. If you take gold, no lower gold, no higher gold. Say Naga. There is no higher and lower. Pancha, Chaturvarna, no Chaturvarnas. They are not part of the Hindu system. The Sad knows that, Professor Kanchela has said. So why I am not Hindu? No? We worship, we go there. There is no middleman between God and human being. There is no caste system. There is no gender discrimination. Now they are imitating the Varna system. And also Britishers, they never integrated tribals. They exploited, they imposed tax, and they took missionaries and go there. They allocated some grants and you study it. They never integrated. After India got independence, the Indian states started integration.
All right. So here comes the end of the program, but before that, I just say sorry to those who could not raise the questions, but you will have enough opportunity to raise during tea times, and just have a chat with your person who you want to ask the question. The point is that you will meet two kind of people in your life. The one is who the person who is twisting the facts to suit the theories, and there is another kind of persons who will twist the theories to suit the fact. So fair enough, you may have your own judgments, but the tea time is still a time of question hour, and you can have your discussions now. That the next session is quite that the wait is for since morning, and I was looking for this session which Professor Kanchalai is going to head. So thank you so much for joining this seminar, because you add value to this conference. Thank you for joining us, and thank you everyone for being a part of my session. Thank you my panelists and the organizers for such a wonderful treat, not only a session. Thank you everyone.